I don't see it up on my screen yet, but you just tell me if it's up there and I'm frozen.
I'm being told someone else is sharing.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So I'll hand you in a moment, back to you in a moment.
Perfect.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on day two of our scheduled pre-conference talks. We're really happy to have you join us as we gear up for our upcoming conference next week. So my name is Piers Weigers, and I am the training coordinator for the Child Bride Network. I'm first generation immigrant, and I acknowledge my role as a guest on these lands. As a national network, Child Bride works across many traditional indigenous territories. Our head office is located in the unceded territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka peoples, a long-standing place of gathering and exchange. I recognize the ongoing impacts of colonial systems on the health and well-being of Indigenous children and families, and I offer this acknowledgement with humility and a commitment to continued learning. I welcome you all. If you wanted to post in the chat an acknowledgement, feel free to do so. And with that, hoping to set the stage for today's session. And so in the schedule you would have received, we outlined a few on the talks that you will be hearing today. So in the session, you'll hear about First Nations-led knowledge mobilization, youth-led and youth-informed research, and lessons learned from ethical and meaningful youth engagement. There's also a strong focus on co-design, bringing together youth, families, caregivers, clinicians, and researchers to shape interventions and studies in areas like ADHD, nutrition, autism, sleep, and caregiver support. Across these talks, you'll see how lived experience is being centered to inform both research processes and real-world interventions. Throughout the day, we've also built in a few group Q&As. So as you're listening, feel free to note down any questions, reflections, or connections to your own work that you have, and we'd love to hear about them and in that open discussion period. So before we get started, just a few housekeeping items to take note of. Please be sure to mute yourself unless you are participating in the Q&A or asking a question to any of our presenters. And similarly, if you're not presenting, just to help preserve some bandwidth, please do disable your webcam. So as I mentioned, we will be having some time for questions and answers and engagement with the presenters. So you're more than welcome to just enter a question in the chat, marking it for everyone, and we'll call it out and read it to the participants. To the presenters as we go through the session. Or alternatively, you can just feel free to raise your hand, and we'll be happy to call on you and have you address the presenters directly. So with that, thank you again all for joining us and helping us kick off what we hope is a great start to the upcoming conference. So with that, let's get started with our first group. And I'm going to hand it over to Serene and Priscilla.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. My name is Priscilla Medeiros. I'm the Community Engagement and Knowledge Mobilization Specialist on the Prenatal Opioid Exposure Project, and I'm from the Edwin S.H. Leong Center for Healthy Children. Serene, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name is Serene Kirpin. I'm at Vancouver Island University, formerly Ontario Tech, when we started this work almost 8 years ago, and I've had the privilege to co-lead it alongside Astrid Gutman and Aggie Mizuko and Priscilla and many of the community leaders and champions that we work with.
Perfect. So today we'll be providing an update on our collaborative work alongside First Nation communities in Ontario. And we want to begin by acknowledging and thanking the elders, community members, service providers, educators, and people with lived and living experience from the participating First Nation communities who shared their time, knowledge, and care with us for so many years. And this project exists because of their leadership and trust.
So, as I had mentioned in my introduction, this project goes back many years. We are now obviously in phase two, which is knowledge mobilization, but it's really important to understand how this work started. Um, in Canada, we have an opioid crisis, and oftentimes, and I think more so over the last several years, we now recognize that mothers and children are impacted, as many people who struggle with opioid misuse are in their childbearing years. And the percentages of babies born between 2020 and 2023, obviously, was 8.6% for the First Nations combined to 1.1 overall in Ontario. And we have statistics going back farther than this from the phase 1 of our work. So obviously there is pardon me, a challenge here that First Nations are stepping up to address, particularly the many communities that we work with. Do you want to go on to the next slide? So this project came about from a few First Nations who reached out to one of our previous PIs on phase 1 at an Indigenous health conference who were concerned with the health of school-age children who they knew had been exposed to opioids prenatally. From there, we met with those communities and had the decision to open it up to a larger geographical region, which ended up being a good large geographical area of southern Ontario. It was a certain health catchment area. Um, and we did a lot of engagement in inviting communities out to share their concerns and their thoughts. And we had two very large regional events that were really well attended. And at the end of sort of that earliest phase, we had 13 communities sign on to work with us in the first phase. Next slide. So working with those communities, we established two goals, and obviously the first is to build relationships. When you're dealing with a really sensitive topic like this, and I feel like I don't need to spend a lot of time doing this because I might be preaching to the choir here, that those relationships are the foundation of the work when you're looking at data that can be challenging and hard for communities with a historic legacy of issues pertaining to substance use. So that was first and foremost. And then the second part was making sure that we're gathering community specific information for these communities, which is then culturally specific as well, on both the impacts of prenatal opioid exposure and then the prevalence and associated health challenges that mothers are facing. So this came together as a mixed methods project where the first phase we were looking at health administration data from ICES, looking at the prevalence in these communities of prenatal opioid exposure and associated withdrawal challenges and maternal health statistics that just help paint a picture for community and community leaders of who's being affected and some of the associated challenges. But then we also knew that that might be a bit of a deficit approach. And I mean, we weren't pretending that this was going to be, a rose-colored glasses project. We had some insight and sort of the communities on the challenges that they were facing. But we wanted to make sure that where we could, we were taking a strength-based lens. So we actually we started doing some qualitative research, and what we thought would be a small subset of data turned out to be a very, very large, the largest subset of data I've ever worked with in my career. We had 19 focus groups and 32 individual interviews with people with lived experience. So this could be mums, this could be elders, grandparents, healthcare providers, anybody who's working directly in the community and impacted by prenatal opioid exposure. And we came up with sort of these categories of research, and I could walk you through the qualitative process, but that's not why we're here. Looking at, the impacts and the challenges, but also the strengths, what the communities were doing and what they wanted to do, and some ideas that they had for addressing these. Because at the end of the day, we want solutions rooted in community, and that's sort of where phase 2 came along. Next slide. So at the end of this phase 1, we had 13 community-specific reports that obviously had that tailored data, but then a large aggregate, which you can find on the ICE website, and it shows the aggregated data and the qualitative data. And we'd love for you to go take a look. It's, I think, one of the best pieces of knowledge mobilization that I've had the privilege of working on in my career because it is accessible and aesthetically engaging and doesn't necessarily read like many of the readings that most of us probably on this call have been forced to read our entire career. But from that, we didn't want to end the project, nor did the communities. And we started thinking, and this started really early, right when we were doing the qualitative data, is how do we mobilize this data? Now that it's there, a report's great, but what do we do next? Go ahead.
So this takes us into phase two, which included three main areas of work. So first, we worked with 9 participating First Nation communities to develop a knowledge mobilization plan that reflected their priorities, specific audiences, and ways of sharing knowledge. Second, we updated the quantitative data from phase one to include more recent data from 2020 to 2023 for all 13 First Nation communities. And third, we supported the design and evaluation of those specific knowledge mobilization products and activities that were created. At the same time, we also conducted a project level evaluation to reflect both the process and the impact of this incredible work. So one thing I want to note is that in phase two, it was led by the First Nation communities themselves. Our role as the project team was not to direct any of the work, but to support each of the community advisory working groups, both individually and collectively, based on what they told us is most helpful for sharing and using the findings in ways that fit their needs, priorities, and context. So knowledge mobilization within the respective phase two really meant making meaningful links between existing knowledge, new evidence, and lived experience, and using that knowledge in ways that support real change. And at the core of it is making sure that families and community members can actually benefit from the research findings, not just that the findings, exist in places that they can't access. Now, on this slide, we've referenced a paper by Dr. Janet Smiley called Sharing What We Know About Living a Good Life, Indigenous Approaches to Knowledge Translation, which was a resource that we were referencing when thinking through this specific work. And one line that I think really stuck with us is this idea that stories themselves can hold medicine, and the act that sharing of stories can itself be a form of healing. And that really resonated with how communities were engaging with and making sense of phase one findings. So how did we do this? Each participating community formed its own local advisory working group that included people with lived and living experience, elders, community leadership and members, and service providers. And that work itself was guided by the First Nations principles of OCAP, Indigenous research ethics. So those principles include respect, relevance, reciprocity, and responsibility, as well as the PHAC Knowledge Translation Planning Primer. And at a high level in phase two, as I mentioned, we worked alongside 9 First Nation communities to co-create 25 knowledge sharing activities and products. More than the number itself was how these were developed. And all of these activities, as I mentioned, were community led. These included things like social media campaigns, community conferences, a sharing circle, as well as videos to increase awareness and dialogue. We also took a much broader view when it came to impact, really valuing those relational and cultural outcomes such as trust, connection, leadership, and shared understanding. And in this way, knowledge mobilization became both a process and an outcome, supporting change while strengthening the relationships that had been built over 7 years of partnership. I'm very excited to share with you that we've published a protocol paper in BMJ Open that outlines the design, methods, and guiding principles for phase two. And this paper really describes our mixed methods evaluation approach, our commitment to community engagement, as well as how the evaluation was designed to support the learnings alongside implementation. So I encourage you, if you're interested in learning more, to scan the QR code and to take a read of the full protocol paper. In terms of key learnings from phase two thus far, again, at a very high level, what we've learned is that community-led co-design work really takes time, and it should be paced by community readiness and relationships. We also have to thank and put at the front the importance of having a funder like ChildBright, who's committed to supporting First Nations-centered health research as defined by the community partners and the project team, as well as building trust, connection, and shared understanding being such an important thing, perhaps as much as the creating the tools and resources themselves. These relational outcomes I want to share is not a side effect of the work that was done. They're really the core impact in itself and shaped what was possible in moving this forward. In terms of next steps for those that are interested, we are moving forward with completing our full mixed methods analysis of the project and sharing our findings through journal articles and conference presentations. We're also continuing to work closely with the community partners and partnered agencies to consider how the findings from both phase 1 and 2 can inform future efforts and collaboration. Pass it over to Serene to conclude the presentation.
Thanks, Priscilla. If you are interested in learning more, I know it's really hard to pack in 8 years of work into a few minutes. You're welcome to reach out to either of us to learn more about the project or ways of working, or I think we've probably given access to the two primary publication outlets that we have here. But as Priscilla said, we are just really grateful for the opportunity to work with the communities and for the support that we've received from ChildBright to do this work in a good way. Thank you very much, and I hope everybody has a great day.
Thank you so much, Serene and Priscilla. All right, so our next group of presenters submitted a recording. So it's our from our National Youth Advocacy Council. So I'll play the recording. And so we are fortunate to have a few of them in the audience. So stick around for the Q&A if you have any particular questions for this set of presenters. All right, so I will share if anything, if our technical testing this morning worked, it should be fine. But if not, feel free to just interject and we can reshare. All right.
Welcome to Visions for a Brighter Future by ChildBright in partnership with KBHN or Kids Brain Health Network, ANYAC, National Youth Advocacy Council. My name is Jacob Birchall. I am an ANYAC member with epilepsy, autism, dyslexia, and ADD, or attention deficit disorder. The gaps we see as we look in the future, we envision it is important to recognize the gaps we have seen and still see with youth with brain-based developmental disabilities. The ChildBright, in partnership with KBHN ANYAC, fills a big gap by creating spaces where youth voices are valued and taken seriously, and by helping researchers hear directly from youth. But we need to do more about shared power earlier in projects, not just consultations after plans are made. We see that there is still an accessibility gap where we need to support and recognize different communication styles, sensory needs, and flexible ways to participate. Overall, while we all work towards inclusive spaces, there is still a representation gap, and we do not see enough Indigenous youth represented in research and conference spaces. We hope this changes in the future. We always need more intersectionality, having more diversity and inclusion, and more voices at the table, and looking at people's experiences through different parts of their identity. We have seen that the research still focuses on what we don't have or don't do, and it doesn't focus enough on quality of life, strengths, and real-world supports that we all share. While we think the ENIAC really helps with connectivity between youth with brain-based developmental disabilities, it is hard to find similar people outside of advocacy groups. Another gap we see is that there is still space for more acceptance of youth from adults. We want to be taken seriously and be heard, as our experiences are as valuable as any research. We see that sometimes research takes a long time to affect policy and to have real-world impact, and the work we do is towards addressing this gap. Finally, I want to draw your attention to the optical illusion maze to the right side of the slide. It represents the foreverness and constant maze that many people experience having brain-based disabilities, especially for me. In more detail, it represents the foreverness of having any disability and not being able to control it, even if we wanted to. And the constant maze that many people constantly live through represents the constant struggles, confusion, mysteries, and anything else about the brain regarding how it impacts the individual with the disability. Effectively, how the brain is stuck in a never-ending maze that makes it not able to perform tasks 100% until it gets out of this never-ending maze. We see these gaps still present, but continuously work as ENIAC to address them by building bridges and connecting people, as Kelsey will now tell you about.
Hi, my name is Kelsey. I am a member of the ENIAC living with cerebral palsy. The bridges we envision are about connection between youth, researchers, communities, and systems that often don't talk to each other. Through media, storytelling, and visibility, our work helps turn lived experience into awareness and awareness into change, including policy change. One of the strongest bridges the ENIAC builds is between youth and researchers. Since 2020, we have had 19 external consultations to ChildBright and 33 internal ChildBright consultations, including with Kids Brain Health Network, also abbreviated as KBHN. The collaboration is relationship-based and genuinely inclusive. Practical support such as plain language summaries, multiple ways to contribute, and flexible, accessible formats make it possible for more youth to participate meaningfully. To us, having researchers actively seek our perspectives doesn't feel tokenistic. Rather, it makes us feel truly involved. Personally, being part of the ENIAC has also deepened my connection to the disability community, especially among other youth. There's something powerful about being in a space where people feel comfortable talking about their disabilities, where there's recognition, understanding, and real support. Community matters, especially before and after diagnosis, and is something many people struggle to find. I've loved the opportunities this work has brought, including conducting research, testing ideas, speaking out, and working with researchers and organizations such as disability foundations and hospitals. The ENIAC continues to grow through recruiting new members, improving diversity, offering paid youth roles and mentorship, as well as hosting webinars, training sessions, and conferences that keep these conversations moving forward. Ultimately, the bridge we envision is one where youth feel empowered to engage in necessary conversations, where lived experience informs research, and where visibility leads to understanding, in turn leading to lasting change for future generations.
Hi, my name is Sierra, and I'm the co-chair of the ENIAC. This is our hopes for the future. Referring to the puzzle pieces, these are our hopes that youth with brain-based developmental disabilities are recognized as experts in our own lives with real decision-making power. We want to know how those big decisions are made so we can have that agency. We want recognition in what positive and negative feelings come with diagnoses when we're kids or young adults, and that we can have time to process those feelings free of external pressure. We want to know what our resources are when we are diagnosed and how easy or challenging they are to access, so we can have more personal and financial freedom to achieve our dreams. We want to put together the missing pieces to see the whole picture. Referring to the brain blurbs, our hopes is to seek out more representation and leadership pathways for youth who do not often see themselves reflected, including Indigenous youth and other equity-deserving communities. There should also be fewer barriers to participating in that research that'll lead to fundamental changes in services and policy. Going beyond hospitals and research, consulting with provincial and federal governments about accessibility and the myriad of other needs we have as disabled youth. Along with knowledge mobilization projects, show the link between media and awareness, how our work has changed our lives. Referring to the podcast tree, our hopes is to see more of ENIAC stuff across different media, For example, our podcast, Voices Unheard. This podcast aims to share the ENYAC experiences in different areas of our lived and living experiences as youth to be a way to answer researchers' questions as well as to provide perspectives to the world. We're aiming to air this in March of 2026. Fingers crossed. Speaking of hopes, our future is growing. Next slide. We are welcoming 3 new members this year, Luigi, Henry, and Benji. You'll get to know all their faces soon, and we look forward to seeing their contributions. I'd also like to thank our wonderful, dedicated coordinator, Heather. She has worked so hard to help us all feel heard. Finally, we really appreciate the support from all these organizations. Thanks so much for listening to our presentation. We hope it has made you as excited for the future as we are. Please feel free to reach out to us at engagement@childbright.ca. Thanks.
Well, so thank you to the ENYAC and particularly Jacob, Kelsey, and Sierra for their presentation. And yeah, looking forward to connecting with Sierra and Logan in the Q&A in just a few moments. And next up, I can hand over the podium to Sakiko, who's going to continue on that theme. And yeah, feel free to take it away, Sakiko.
Thank you so much, Gail. And actually, I'm very happy to co-present with Shafnia, one of those youth co-researchers from the research team, and also Linda, also from the knowledge mobilization program. So this is our project, Lesson Learned from Critical Ethical Engagement with Youth, the youth project.
Thank you so much, Sakiko and Shafnia, for being here today. To provide a little bit of a background to this project is that we recognize, especially with this audience at the ChildBright Network, around the emphasis on engaging with youth and health services research. And they can provide so much value to the process of research, especially with sharing their perspectives, inputs, and identifying priorities for health services research. However, there can be unintended negative consequences in participatory projects, and this can lead to negative experiences among youth, especially when we think of some of the barriers and challenges to engaging with youth in research. Some of these barriers and challenges can occur at the systems level. It can also occur at the project level, such as scheduling time, compensation, and also lack of understanding or expectations about different roles among the team. And so researchers also need to have practical guidance and training specifically on how to ethically engage with youth. This project, the CU project, aims to have the following objectives: to understand the perspectives and experiences of young people with brain-based developmental disabilities who have partnered with research teams. And 2, to create training resources for researchers to support their development of research partnerships with young people. And this slide outlines the process of our integrated knowledge translation to complete this work. We partnered with 2 members of the National Youth Advocacy Council as co-researchers. One of them is Shafnia, who is here today, and also Matthias, and both of them will be at the ChildBright conference in person. To prepare for this project, we started off with reviewing together the interview guide. Shafnia also designed the project logo for our team using her creative skills, and we worked together to co-create a recruitment video, especially to highlight the importance of this project. We later conducted training specifically on learning how to interview and how to code transcripts based on a video that I also shared with the team. Both Sakiko and I offered this training as Shafni and Matthias really want to learn what coding looked like. We collected data with specifically semi-structured interviews. We then worked together to code the transcripts and discuss the findings. Currently, we are in the phase of the knowledge mobilization to share this work through presentations such as here today, as well as we created a tip sheet together. This framework Here is the youth participation P7 model that was used to guide the process of our coding. You can see on this framework there are 7 components, starting with protection to outline what are the measures that is needed to protect youth when it comes to ethical engagement. What would need to take place to create a safe space for them. There's also purpose. What is the purpose for not only the project, but also among the team for partnering together? Recognizing the positionality of where we are all coming from, outlining the process, not only the process for working together, but also in the research process, the different perspectives and values that we bring to this work, recognizing, acknowledging, and mitigating the power dynamics between researchers and youth, and also identifying the place of where this work is taking place. And so specifically to our qualitative methodology, we had 3 young people with neurodevelopmental conditions who participated in this study, and they all had experience in mental health research projects. Like I mentioned earlier, we conducted semi-structured interviews with these participants, both youth and researchers conducted the interviews together. We coded together, and we had multiple team discussions and an iterative process to identify the themes.
Thank you so much, Linda. So I'm very happy to share some of those findings based on that youth P7 model. So one thing is related to the purposes. So young people who we interviewed participated not only to share their lived experience for changes, but also to learn and contribute to the research process. So one participant mentioned, I just wanted to be able to use my lived experience to make a difference, but also interested in facilitating skills and building those for the project. The second theme related to process. So online platform, those interviewed participants mentioned that they were participating through the online platform, and then so it made engagement opportunities more accessible. But at the same time, online participation could be challenging when the camera needed to be kept on. So just one quote from the participant, I think just the expectation of having your video camera on the whole time was a little bit hard. Regarding the perspectives, also those interviewed participants mentioned that they are also looking for the diversity of participants, since one individual voice cannot represent the whole community. So one participant mentions, I feel like oftentimes the voices are channel central. Just to be able to give voice to the rural experience is important. So this is the quote from participant living in the rural areas. So they kind of wanted to add more different perspectives. Regarding positioning, so young people always sought roles that align with their personal goals and interests. So one interviewed participant mentioned that it would have been nice to be able to visit more groups than just one, but in this case, the schedule did not work out. In terms of the protection, so young people, they mentioned that it was not necessarily easy to ask for accessibility support and safety, but once they built rapport and relationship with the research team, it became a little bit easier to ask for some support. So one quote, at that point, a lot of RAs, research assistants, really knew me and what I have been through. It made me feel a little bit more confident in asking what I needed. And the second project, not connected, a bit harder for me to ask for what I needed. In terms of the process, so as we already saw, young people are always eager and able to contribute to various knowledge mobilization activities after the study. So one case, one participant mentioned satisfaction might be hard, more like thought this, because it felt like, okay, what do I do now? The research team was moving on and continuing. So some people had positive experience in relation to the knowledge mobilization, but another participant mentioned some of those sadness coming out of that ending of the research process. Lastly, regarding the our relations. So when researchers generally ask for their ideas to be incorporated into the project, and then so it helps building trust and minimize power imbalances. So one participant mentions, it really felt like it wasn't just a suggestion when we were talking, it was that we were seen as experts in our own lived experience. So the researchers, it's not like, oh, okay, thanks for feedback. So now I pass on to Shafnia. She can explain a little bit more process of our creation of our final product.
Thank you, Sakiko and Linda. So this is our tip sheet. I also put a link in the chat. It was created to support researchers in developing research partnerships with youth in patient-oriented research. So after data analysis, we started working on the tip sheet through Google Jamboard. We came up with an idea to show a roadmap to provide a practical action items at each stage of the research process. So we had 5 categories. The first is designing, the second is recruitment, the third is preparation and onboarding, the fourth is working with youth partners, and the fifth one is wrapping up the project. Then we started to extract the key ideas from the result of our coding analysis on what researchers should know when working with youth with brain-based disabilities, alongside with selecting quotes from the interviews that emphasize or support the potential tips. So one important aspect that emerged from the interview was surrounding compensation for youth partners. One participant shared why they preferred monetary compensation as it was accessible compared to gift cards. So most gift cards are often limited to certain stores, therefore requiring them to either shop or spend more money at retail locations such as Indigo's, and they're not cheap. So what we offered was compensation can be adjusted to youth preferences or background, and it was incorporated into the tip sheet. We then worked on refining the content of the tip sheet for clarity and consistency to match the objective. Once the graphic designer sent us a tip sheet draft to review, as a group, we discussed our comments and edits to be made for the tip sheet draft, such as designing the details, rearranging some of the contents around leading up to the most recent version you see around here. It was interesting to see how we were able to transform the results of the studies from like 3 participants, right? And we were able to provide something that's more practical, right? And you can apply into real world situations, showing that there's no limits from learning from other people's lived experience.
Thank you so much, Shafnia. And so here are some recommended actions. So you can also check out our tip sheet. But just to highlight some of those actions that we kind of wanted to suggest. But I think one thing is also like those diversity perspectives. And so we are also looking for youth with diverse perspectives, diverse conditions, but also we find it important to have diversity reflecting on the research members as well. And also to provide those accessible engaged formats and creating opportunities for youth partners to develop further skills because they're always eager to learn and grow together. So yeah, this is our findings. So thank you so much. And thank you so much for the Child Bright Training Innovation Fund to allow us to have this. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Sakiko and Linda. All right, so for our last presenter in this group before we head over to the Q&A, I'll hand over to Amanda. And Linda, I guess, if you're co-presenting as well.
Yes.
Welcome back.
Co-presenting. Thank you. Great. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. Today, we are here to present both Amanda and I on the youth engagement and research, creating opportunities for youth to flourish and thrive. I do want to acknowledge that we had a third co-presenter, Jessica Gabors, but unfortunately she wasn't feeling well today, but does hope to be in person at the Child Bright Conference on Monday. And so our co-presenters here today is Amanda St. Dennis, who is a co-leader, co-principal investigator, as well as a youth partner on this project, along with myself. And so we'll be presenting about the process of how we came to work on this project, the Youth Engagement and Research Project. And we have an infographic that we encourage you to check out on the virtual platform. Amanda will add in the link in the chat.
So in order to explain where we are now, we need to give you a very quick overview to those who don't know the history of the Youth Engagement in Research project. So the Family Engagement and Research course started in 2018, and in 2020, out of a need that came out of Ontario Brain Institute and CanChild's CPNet, it was realized that one of the ways that we could get more youth involved on advisory councils and in research was by providing training, but we realized that it really wasn't out there. So that started phase 1 of our research, was just getting an idea of what would be needed. And the 3 top training topics were research youth communication, roles and responsibilities, and how to find partnership opportunities. It was also stated that diverse youth representation, multiple types of delivery methods, and co-learning between youth and researchers were the top importance. So out of this, 4 of the YER members, including myself, took the FER course in 2023 and identified potential adaptations not only for youth, but as the family engagement program in general. And then from 2024 to 2026, we are currently doing minor adaptations of the FER course in order to run cohorts.
Thank you, Amanda. And so as Amanda mentioned, our goal with the Youth Engagement Research Project is to adapt the Family Engagement and Research FER course to then make these adaptations to create a tailored Youth Engagement Research or YER course. Our teams include the following: our leadership team, so both myself and Amanda St. Dennis, and we have 3 youth and 3 researchers among our leadership team. There's also the FER Youth course, and that includes co-coordinators now with Amanda and myself, co-instructors, including both youth and researchers, and Amanda also holds the role as our accessibility champion and engagement mentor. And we hope to build capacity with this team in order to continue to train researchers and youth who can take on these roles. We have a full project team of researchers, youth partners, parent partner across Canada, and partnerships with Child Health Research Networks, including this Child Bright Network, centers, and organizations. And so what have we done so far and how have we done it? In 2018, there's the Family Engagement Research course that was co-developed by parents and researchers. Our papers for this FER course includes developing, implementing, and scaling the course, as well as evaluating the course. In 2020, a youth engagement research team, including Amanda, was formed to identify the training needs of youth with neurodevelopmental disabilities, and these training needs were shared in our publication. In 2023, as Amanda mentioned, 4 YER team members took the FER course and identified potential adaptations. As part of the course, they co-created an accessibility booklet as their knowledge translation tool. And currently, we are working on adapting the FER course. By running youth cohorts of the FER course, we are now in the 2nd youth cohort. To date, held focus groups from the first cohort, which included 11 participants from focus groups and interviews. And with the second youth cohort, we hope to continue to gather more data by the end of spring 2026. What we have heard so far is that youth and researchers wanted the creation of an inclusive, accessible space to learn, connect, and partner in research. They also suggested course changes, including increased accessibility and more focus on youth specifically.
So our vision is ultimately to promote opportunities to create an empowering space with and for youth to engage in research. So this brings us to ongoing reflections. So there are many reflections as we continue through this and we start putting together our data and our knowledge translation. But our top 3 so far are needing to take the time to have ongoing team reflections. So asking what are your goals, motivations, and roles, including leadership roles for youth or those with lived experience or those with lived experience. It's also about building instructor capacity. Ask what do you hope to achieve personally and or professionally as a course instructor, or as a course coordinator, or as, in my case, engagement mentor, accessibility champion. And then finally, one that keeps coming up in numerous conversations is acknowledging and addressing institutional barriers. So how do we as a team advocate for change and recognize youth in leadership roles? One example being, how can we hire youth when institutions will not allow us to properly hire youth under the age of 18? So how do we make sure to able to include younger youth without it being tokenistic?
Thank you so much, Amanda. And that brings us to a wrap with our presentation. Of course, if you have any more questions, you're always welcome to contact either of us or both of us.
Well, thank you so much, Linda and Amanda. All right, perfect. Now for the fun part, open up for some discussion. So if you have any questions, any thoughts you want to share with any of the Slater presenters we had just featured, feel free to raise your hand or place a comment in the chat, and we can certainly relay it. But maybe I can get things kicked off as you think of some questions you might want to add. And I guess I'll start with Serene and Priscilla. I think you kind of got to it. You mentioned it at the end of your presentation. But I was just wondering more broadly, what lessons does your project offer about building trust, community, capacity, and evidence through Indigenous-led knowledge sharing?
That's a big question, Pierre.
Bullet points,
Priscilla.
top level.
I think a lot about some of the members of our team talking about not sweeping big issues under the rug and not shying away from them and being allies in them and knowing that can be very scary when we think about the legacy of colonialism in some of the communities and the challenges that they have experienced with substance misuse. And so I think about the courage that it took to say, we'd like to see the numbers, sitting beside them as they look at those numbers and the alarm, but also saying, okay, we've ripped off the Band-Aid, we know what the issue is, and now let's move forward. So I think that's one thing that stands out to me is like the courage that you get to see and support people in doing those types of things. And then I think, engagement that leads to impact and outcomes is something, and it's something that I think that we're going to be publishing on. But looking at the knowledge mobilization products and trying to, seek out some metrics around what we're doing and what communities are doing, but also aligning with Indigenous knowledge mobilization principles, which don't always sit with Western metrics. So finding that middle ground. But yeah, thinking about tangible outcomes for me. A lot of the work that I've done in First Nation communities across the country, communities want engagement. Absolutely, that's the cornerstone, but they also want an outcome associated with the time that they are giving us for the engagement. Engagement just for the sake of engagement is not sufficient anymore. Engagement that leads to tangible outcomes that can lead to improvements in child health is what they're looking for, because it's often the people in the communities that we work in, and I think this is like part of the human condition, that the people who sign up to collaborate and that are our champions in community also are wearing 7 other hats and have 14 projects off the side of their desk. So they're also looking for efficiencies, and sometimes it's coffee and a chat, but sometimes it's show me the numbers. Now I have to get to the next meeting. So I think it's like striking that balance of engagement and friendship in many situations, but also getting down to business. Priscilla?
Serene, you said everything that I had in mind, especially with the evaluation component and finding and striking that balance of meeting Indigenous knowledge sharing halfway in terms of impact. And I think that's something we have done, an excellent job on and will be publishing on in future papers to showcase what this looks like in practice. Because there was very little literature that we could find that was exemplary to this point outside of those experts and champions like Janet Smiley, who already exist in this space, and certainly taking those learnings, as I had mentioned, to inform the approaches, frameworks, and lenses that we were bringing into conversation into the room with the First Nations communities.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Priscilla, and answering for that wonderful response. Yeah, no, so I mean, a lot of work to be done, and yeah, I think it just takes time. So cognizant of the time, so apologies, we're running a few minutes behind. So I'm not seeing any questions from the audience, but maybe I can just pose a general question to our other presenters, so to Logan, Sierra, Sekiko, Linda, and Amanda. And this is, I guess, more of a general question and more of a, I guess, top level summary. So feel free to just briefly touch on it. But the question I have for you then is, how can research projects move beyond consultation to ensure that youth have sustained decision-making roles in projects or on initiatives? So anyone, feel free to chime in if you have if you have something burning that you think is the critical component. Feel free to just chime in starting there.
I see Amanda put in the chat, putting youth in leadership roles. I'll chime in. I think in terms of moving beyond consultation is really clear communication, having that opportunity to make sure that there's time to build rapport, get to know youth to get to know researchers, understanding the motivations. I think that was an aspect across both the CU project and the Youth Engagement Research Project was understanding the different roles. And of course, both Amanda and I are co-presenting on co-leadership together and what that looks like in a later presentation today.
Wonderful, thanks. Yeah, so I guess the gist of it is similar to before: put in the time, create the position, create the opportunities, and just listen. Wonderful, excellent. All right, well, thank you so much to all our presenters. Great way to kick off the day. So I will hand it over to Corinne, who will lead us through our next cohort of speakers.
Thanks, Pierre. So the next person that we have is Kirsten. Welcome, Kirsten. Handing it over to you.
Thank you. Hi. Okay. I was supposed to co-present as well, but unfortunately it didn't work out that way. So I'm sorry you're going to be pounded with my voice the whole time. Apologies.
No problem.
All right. So hi, I'm Kirsten. Today I'm going to be presenting on behalf of the Point Advisory Group. So we're going to be talking about lessons that we learned when it came to co-designing an ADHD and nutritional trial alongside a patient and family advisory group. So what you're going to really see in the next 10 minutes, so you're going to learn kind of what's our point. So you're going to meet the advisory group, kind of see our aim. You're going to get a glance into our process, how we engaged with our patient partners, as well as our key milestones, what we learned, so our learnings from an evaluation that we did, some conclusions and future directions, and then the anticipated impacts, and of course, why these matter. So meet our advisory group. As you can see, come from all over Canada. We have many different backgrounds and very diverse experiences. There's a lot of us in there. So our focus, so children with ADHD and their families, they often face barriers when it comes to getting a diagnosis and then accessing supportive treatment and care. Particularly for those seeking non-pharmacological options, there is little studies that were developed in partnership with like the patients and families who will be using them. So the POINT trials, so the patient-oriented innovative nutrition trial, it builds on findings from a previously done MADI study. I'm going to go into that a little bit. But it was essentially a study on micronutrients as either supplemental or supportive treatment for ADHD medication. So our big picture goal, building on that MADI study, we're going to collaborate with people with lived experiences and move toward our collective goal of expanding ADHD nutrition research. So why did we use a patient advisory group? So our aim was really to understand how patient and family engagement could make a more relevant and accessible nutritional trial by really grounding that research in the lived experiences of the children and their families who are living with ADHD. So how we involved our partners. So they were really involved at every step, from the beginning of shaping research questions, refining materials, as well as the interpretation and dissemination of any findings or results that we had. So some key milestones, we had the POINT logo creation that you can see in the bottom left corner. We also had 2 retreats, one of which we created a patient journey map, and then the other one we created a research brief that was kind of on how to better ADHD in research, like how to better involve patient partners. We did a lot of networking at conferences such as this one, and then we also have a few publications that I'll feature at the end, but we also do have some that are currently in the works as well. So we've got a lot going on. So in order to really understand like how to better involve that patient voice in research, as well as the fact that inclusive strategies for recruitment and retention, these remain to be ongoing challenges, particularly in populations that are experiencing complex health challenges, specifically in this case ADHD. So as a guidance for patient-oriented research in ADHD and nutritional trials is limited. This study, we aim to evaluate the patient engagement that went on within the POINT advisory group and kind of see what worked well and what needed improvement in the future. So our method was the Peers 22 survey. I don't know if you're familiar with that. And then some one-on-one interviews. So we had 11 of 14 that responded to the survey, as well as 5 of 14 of our members participated in interviews. So I'm going to get into the results. So the results were kind of broken down to 5 key learnings or 5 key categories. So the first was the project-focused communication. So our members found that communication was really convenient and accessible. We had those easy-to-use tools, Zoom, WhatsApp, but they did find that we have those sub-working groups that would focus on creating those outputs that I shared earlier. And they found that sometimes the sharing across those groups was a little bit difficult, and then that they could have also used some more frequent updates. And then working with group dynamics while respecting the diversity of members. So what really worked well was that our members felt that there was a lot of trust and mutual respect, and that there, of course, like I said earlier, we had a lot of different perspectives, so we had a lot of input from different backgrounds. Some improvement that could have been seen was some more representation when it came to the pharmacological side, as well as more youth representation, as most of our partners were either parents or they were like professionals, clinicians and such. So fostering active and meaningful involvement. So this was kind of on the project or the research team side. So our members felt that we gave them a lot of opportunities, an efficient amount of time, as well as the workload was not too much for them to handle. They felt that they got a lot of sufficient support when it came to training, and that working groups really helped guide them on their role, like really what they could help out in, and that their contributions were appreciated. They did feel, though, that there was that that expected restriction of meeting virtually. Sometimes it can be kind of difficult to meet virtually, especially when we have people from all over Canada, the time zones and everything. And then also just the infrequency of meeting. Our meetings were every 3 months, so sometimes there was big gaps between. And then the difficulty of grasping the role at the beginning, just like I said, we had a lot going on, so sometimes it could be a little bit hard to really understand what your role was, which is why we kind of created those smaller working groups for each output. And then the personal limitations of the members themselves to contribute, sometimes they found that they lacked the time that they really wanted to have personally to dedicate to the project. So what was working well? So overall, we really found that our members really appreciated the flexibility and engagement so that they really got to choose to be more or less involved. Because of those working groups, they could really pick and choose what they wanted to help out on. They liked that the meetings were very dynamic. They felt the environment was very welcoming and inclusive. And then that they had many opportunities to co-create on the outputs, of course. And then when it came to what needed improvement, the member hopes and goals for Point in the long term as well. So we used Microsoft OneDrive. So sometimes they felt that just because of the firmware, it was sometimes difficult for them to access documents in there, just because it was like the University of Lethbridge has some pretty strict restrictions when it comes to that. So especially if you're in an external email or something, it's kind of hard. That they could have used maybe a calendar or a living document with all of our outputs, what we were working on at the present moment, and what they could be like expecting to see. Flexibility for compensation, we kind of just had one way of doing the compensation, and our members did express that they would have preferred to have a choice in how they received compensation. And then as well, some more explanation of the Maddie project, like what we were basing this Point project on. So one of the findings from Point and like this evaluation was the collective desire to continue work beyond Point. So this momentum really inspired the vision for an ADHD and nutrition community of practice. So this is envisioned as a space for ongoing learning and resource sharing, and then connecting families and researchers and professionals. So it would continue to center lived experience to further an equitable and holistic health research and healthcare ecosystem, and also foster brighter futures for children and their families living with ADHD. So what we wanted to share really today was that our findings really demonstrate how meaningful engagement by those with lived experiences and their expertise on collaborative research teams, it can really make research align more closely with the patient and family priorities. So the results really highlight that importance of sustaining engagement beyond a single project, as you saw with our community of practice. That will really bring multiple knowledge users together and really advance ADHD and nutrition research. So why is this important to ChildBright, and why am I here today? So this work really directly contributes to ChildBright's commitment to patient and family partnership and equity in health research and care. So the Point study and the hopefully resulting community of practice demonstrates how authentic engagement can help shape research to be more responsive to the diverse needs, improve inclusivity and accessibility, and really strengthen trust in research. And then our key message, our takeaway, is that sustainable and equitable research ecosystems are built through the co-creation and really shared ownership. By embedding the child and family partner voices throughout the research and working collaboratively together from the ground up, we created research that was not only more meaningful and accessible, but it also was more representative of what the families felt that they truly needed. So this collaboration and the resulting relationships moved us towards a more inclusive childhood disability research ecosystem. So as you can see, we kind of had the Maddie study. I've put the QR codes in here. These ones should be free open access, but yeah, the Maddie study was mostly on like micronutrients, and it was a placebo-controlled randomized clinical trial where children from, I think it was both Canada and the US participated. And then we also had an RCT and open label extension, sorry. And then we also just had another paper published on characteristics of those populations that are more likely to be responsive to micronutrients. So that was exciting. And then if you are interested at all in either being a co-investigator or collaborator on this project or the clinical trial, or if you're interested in having or know someone who would be interested in having their child participate. Yes. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much, Kirsten. Really appreciate it. Next up, we have Sierra.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. I'm going to share my screen here. There we go. Okay. And can everyone see my presentation there?
Yes, we can see it.
Awesome. Okay. So I know I have a short amount of time, so I'll get straight into it. This is The Emotionality of Autism plus ADHD by me, Sierra Lynn V. This is my story. There we go. So just some quick facts for those who don't know me. I was born in Vernon, BC in 1997. My favorite hobbies are art and writing. I'm a student of communications, culture, and journalism. My passions are filmmaking and I'm a video game enthusiast. My current field is social media freelancer, and my dream career is being a producer, actor, and creator. Now, to help me keep this short and neat, I'm a filmmaker at heart, so I'm using Freytag's plot pyramid here, starting with the exposition. The inciting action. So, I was diagnosed with autism under the pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified label when I was 15. That's a mouthful, so I would just say I had a learning slash coordination disability. My mom advocated for me to get a diagnosis and my benefits. She had to pester the province for funding for therapy and even speech slash drama classes. 3, I was raised in a religious, sheltered environment with embodied shame, along with guilt, which greatly affected my self-esteem. 4, I got no direct explanation of my diagnosis or intervention for my symptoms, so I got no autism cake. Even if I had that, I wonder if I would have accepted it. The holdup was personal acceptance among my friends and peers. My mentality was I wanted confirmation I was normal. I just had to work towards it. The last thing I wanted, especially at that age, was to be told that I was different and I couldn't change it. The breaking point. It was then at 23 when I had this mentality that I moved, got a real job, and maintained friendships all at the same time. I was with people who I knew as safe and motivating. 2, I worked stressful 8-hour days and was unable to motivate myself. The days were so long, and I felt like I was asleep on the job half the time. 3, I needed a social worker to help with regular life maintenance, like taxes, province forms, and just how to communicate with my bosses and be happy with my work. At my work, I got inconsistent direction slash supervision with no room for negotiation. Every meeting started out positive, but then would turn negative when I was questioned on why I couldn't meet their mysterious expectations. 5, I was managing severe executive dysfunction while in a dysfunctional workplace. I couldn't express myself freely, and that piled on more stress on top of everything else. I realized I was reaching the point of burnout. So I wanted to burn out cars, not burn out myself. I realized I was reaching that point. Next, the resolution. Fortunately, though, I realized it wasn't my fault. My autism was sending me warning signs I had to listen to. I couldn't suppress them any longer. My peers with autism and or ADHD helped me compare my symptoms. They were so supportive and wholesome. Just as important was learning crucial labor laws like CNES and how to identify signs of poor leadership. I was stuck in an inefficient system, one that was very demotivating, namely the corporate culture and related systems that are disingenuous. The whole fake it till you make it phrase doesn't help or make sense. What was helpful was social media as a source of neurodivergent support and community. An example from Instagram here is from a presentation by Dr. Russell Barkley in Alberta in 2013. The whole thing was 3 hours long. But the most important thing to me here is what the post here reads. The brighter people who struggle with the disorder, they're no longer believed. Nobody can think as far as they did and have ADHD. That hit home for me. So I finally sought out an ADHD diagnosis and got it. So here's how to help. 1, awareness of ADHD weaknesses and strengths in workplaces. Knowing exactly what is expected of us and what we can expect from our supervisors is essential. 2, honesty about adulthood and how to manage multiple responsibilities. Us young ones call it adulting, and none of us have it figured out. We feel like a kid in a suit. 3, since both neurodivergent and neurotypical people can't work 8+ hours a day, since studies have shown that most workers are only productive 2 to 4 hours at most, in a lot of the workplaces that we find ourselves in, at least. 4, having a safeguard from burnout with financial security. This is where access to benefits come to play. Finally, countering stigmas of ADHD with tangible change, because only actions can change minds. Next. To wrap this up, here's some examples of research ideas I had in mind or just discussion topics for later. 1, social media communities for brain-based disabilities. The AGI ADHD project touches on this quite a lot. 2, effectiveness of talk therapy for autism and ADHD, and knowing our brain and finding our heart, even as it chases a butterfly. 3, the effects of religion on autistic and ADHD youth. I don't find this is talked about enough. 4, the curb cut effects that are beneficial to both neurotypical and neurodiverse individuals. Examples are sidewalk curbs, improved public transit, and universal basic income. Okay. So that's my time. Thanks so much for listening to my story and taking in all I had to say. If you'd like to get in touch, scan the code to find my email, or feel free to message me on LinkedIn. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
Thank you so much, Sierra. I really appreciate you sharing your story. I think we all learned a lot from you today. Finally, to round out this segment, this part of the segment, is Amanda. And Linda, it's back to you.
Thank you so much, Corinne. I just need a moment to share my screen.
Not a problem.
And I'll let Amanda introduce us and start off our presentation.
Hi, thank you, Corinne, for the introduction. Sierra, I don't know how we can follow that, but we're going to try. We're here today on behalf of the Youth Engagement and Research Project team to talk about growing together, cultivating a co-leadership model in youth engagement and research. So I'm Amanda. I was briefly introduced before. She, her, and I am a person with lived and living experience, ADHD, autism, anxiety, and cerebral palsy.
And hi, everyone. My name is Linda Nguyen. I'm currently an assistant professor with the Israeli Accelerator, assistant professor in youth, sibling, and community engaged research, and in the faculty of social work at the University of Calgary. And I also started off as a trainee with the Child Bright Network.
Since I've already talked about this, I really don't want to go into this again. Just know that the journey of the YER team and the research has been 5 years, if not more, in the making. It has been led by youth and young adults from the very beginning. It would not have existed without us going, hey, we need this. So, overview and a reminder to please check out our infographic in the poster, online virtual poster. But our overview is that we're going to start on the surface. If you take an iceberg, which is what is in the middle, and you start on the surface, it is what the partnership could look like. Second layer is under the surface, or those guiding principles that are getting us to a leadership. And then delving deeper, or the bottom level of our iceberg, is the questions that can guide our partnership.
And so, on the surface, what can the partnership look like? First off, it means creating opportunities for partners with lived and living experience, PWLEs, to be in leadership roles. It also means sharing of the power between PWLEs and researchers. Really think about who is making the decisions, how are the decisions being made, and also who is at the table and being a part of the research team. Recognize that roles are fluid and dynamic. There are lots of things that are happening in each other's lives. Get to know your team members and also recognize that when they may be a consultant or a partner at one stage of the project, it can also mean that at a later stage, they may want to take on leadership roles or vice versa. Maybe something happens later on. It might be a busy time in their life, and maybe they need to have some time to take a step back. So having these ongoing conversations are so important. Start to be creative to acknowledge and consider individual roles outside of traditional research and partner roles. And so, what can this look like in action? And so, these are examples of the different roles that Amanda and myself have held through the Youth Engagement Research Project. So, first, with being co-researchers. In 2020, a team of youth, a parent, and researchers studied how youth can be trained to be a part of meaningful research. Training was provided to youth partners on how to be engaged throughout the design, conduct, data analysis, and knowledge dissemination. So we really worked together to conduct the research together. We have also been co-principal investigators. In 2023, 4 youth co-investigators, including Amanda here, took the Family Engagement Research or FER course, and they highlighted the need and importance to create a community with youth. And we were successful to receive funding in 2024. And so we also want to just highlight and touch on how we enhance the vocabulary that is used by the Canadian Institutes of Health Research or CIHR. On our grants that we have applied for together, Amanda and other youth partners have been listed as a principal knowledge user or knowledge users. But instead, among our team, we really see this role as principal investigator. We have also been co-leaders together. Our team taught the first youth cohort of the FER course in winter 2025. And through that first cohort, we identified the need for Amanda to have leadership roles in the course. She was an engagement mentor, accessibility champion. I was the course coordinator, and I worked with Amanda to train, and now we are co-coordinating the course together for the second youth cohort that is taking place right now. We have also been co-learners. Amanda and I have regular reflective discussions to identify research gaps, priorities, and our vision of creating a community of youth and researchers.
That leads us to the next step, which is under the surface of those guiding principles. So for us, the guiding principles are communication, respect, learning, and mentorship. And it's co-learning and co-mentorship. It is not a one-way direction. So what does this look like in action? It means putting in the hard work to get to know each other and earn mutual respect. My friends, some of my friends who will also come on this team, jokingly laugh that I put Linda through the ringer of gaining trust, and it took 6 months for me to let down my guard finally and say, okay, I trust you. And as soon as I did that, the others kind of followed and were like, well, if you pass the Amanda test, I guess we're good. It's accessible communication strategies. So that means emails, that sometimes might mean text, but there are other times where my disabilities is not making typing easy. So I have literally sent, or my co-researchers, and so we've sent voice text to Linda going, if you need this in a different method, let me know, but I'll get back to you tomorrow. But it's just accepting that that's communication. It's creating a space to learn and ask questions from each other. So because we've worked and put in the work for mutual respect, I know that from my point of view that I'm in a space where I can be like, but Linda, why are we doing it this way? Or Linda, why is this the decision being made? I don't have to hesitate to ask. I don't have to hesitate to ask to be brought back into the loop or to understand something that maybe to researchers seems really straightforward, but maybe to me as someone who is not in health research, as a education, I'm like, that makes no sense to me. Please break it down. But it's also space provided to take on leadership tasks with support as needed. So as I have gained more leadership skills and become more comfortable in this world, I'm now taking on tasks such as I'm the one figuring out how to have our leadership meeting, our leadership team meet. I'm sending out the doodle polls. I am setting up the invitations, but I'm also the one creating the presentations like this one. This was completely created by me with support by Linda in the background.
So now we'll think about thinking of the iceberg analogy as we have in the visual here, delving deeper. What questions can guide our partnerships? And so in terms of these questions, first asking, what are the best accessible ways to communicate? As Amanda mentioned, we've done text, for example, emails, and also voice messages. So ask and be open to different ways to communicate. And also that these different ways of communication are fluid. It really depends on that kind of context and what is happening. How is respect for different forms of knowledge, expertise, and abilities shown? What are the strengths and limitations of each team member? What goals do we each have?
There's other questions about what can we learn from each other. For example, I also wanted to learn how to code, as did a whole bunch of our partners. And so Linda made a video of a how-to on how to code. And it's now meant that in our latest phase 2 of our project, I'm actually right alongside Linda and coding our data right now. What do we want out of the research project? What is our vision? And that's both immediate, but it's also long-term. What do we want to see? It's not just those short-term goals of our partnership and our research project, but it is those long-term goals. Where would we like to see this? Where would we like to have it translated, shared, etc. And it's also how can mentorship be provided? Informal conversation, webinars, tutorials, invites to conferences, because that's also mentorship.
So now we'll wrap up with reflections. And both Amanda and I discussed about the reflections of what we are taking away from our co-leadership together. First is being creative. Think about being open to creating opportunities for youth to take on leadership roles. For me, I think about how a title is just a title, whether it's principal knowledge user, co-principal investigator, is about thinking how among our team do we discuss, envision, and define the different roles. I want researchers to allow youth the space to define the roles. Like Amanda said, there are skills she wanted to develop. She wanted to learn coding, want to co-lead, co-facilitate the youth cohort of the FER course and our vision together to eventually create that community and space for youth and researchers to connect. So overall, be creative with the different roles and listen to youth for how they define their roles.
For me, it's respect. It's youth and lived experience leaders respecting researchers. It's researchers respecting my lived experience, my education, and seeing that what I can bring to the table is just as important, if not more at times, than the formal academic expertise that you bring to research. It's also respecting that I do not have to tell you all of my story in order to contribute. Researchers do not have the right to my trauma, my life story, just because I'm partnering. So it's respecting that what I say and what I share can be hard, and that sometimes sharing involves needing time to reflect and process from all corners. It's also communication. And yes, we touched on being accessible communication, but it's also being open to clear communication. It's being open to having conversations that you might have to repeat a couple times in order for someone to process it. There has been numerous conversations where we go in a loop because I'm stuck on something or I'm not processing it how you would think that I would process it. And so it keeps coming back because I'm not understanding, but I don't know that I don't understand. So it's being open to communicating differently. It's being open to communicating in a way that matches what your partners need, regardless of whether or not they're in a leadership role, in a collaborator role, in a consultation role. It's not treating our processing difficulties or our quote unquote ignorance as disrespect or as something not worth putting in the hours and putting in the time to communicate with us.
And finally, our reflection is reciprocity. So to truly learn from each other, it's really important to create that space in the relationship and partnership to hear from each other's experiences, to learn and listen to the challenges and barriers of navigating through systems, and understand the areas that are most important that we envision for continuing with the work and ultimately to support and empower youth in research. What I continuously learn is how much it's not just about me as a researcher creating space for youth partners, but also what I can also bring into the relationship and learn. As Amanda and I, we are consistently learning from each other. I consistently learn from her, but more than that, she also provides reciprocal support to me as well, constantly, including in today's multiple presentations. And for her to remind me that with everything that's happening in my life as a researcher is to also breathe. And so recognizing that it is a reciprocal relationship. It's not just always the researchers giving something. It's about us learning from each other in this manner to support each other in our partnership.
Finally, that brings us to the end. We thank you for hearing us out. You can reach both of us at these emails. I'm also happily available on LinkedIn, but I will always happily receive emails.
Thank you so much. I appreciate all the presentations that we heard from Kirsten, Sierra, Amanda, and Linda. Before we open the floor to some questions, Sierra, I noticed that Oksana did post something in the chat, so this could be open to you and to Logan as well from the ENYAC. So she says, great presentation. Sierra's story is beyond insightful and reverberates in so many ways. Has the advisory group included people with lived experience whose primary diagnosis is ADHD? Any thought on possibly expanding inclusion criteria to people who have a different primary diagnosis plus ADHD as a way to help with recruitment and making it even more inclusive? Thank you.
Thank you, Oksana. Just quickly, I have ADHD, and I know I think 2 or 3 other people on the Advocacy Council have ADHD as well as other comorbidities, so that double diagnosis is represented quite well. I think it's just different if a project is asking for people who just have ADHD or just have autism or if we're talking about ADHD, but then of course I have to talk about my autism combined with that. So I think that's the distinction that's a little hard to separate because they're one and the same for all of us.
Thanks, Sierra. Are there any other questions at this moment? Tom, I want to hear from Linda about her thoughts on the prestige of being an academic as a barrier to working as a co-lead with a youth partner.
Thanks, Tom, for the direct question. I would say I started partnering with both youth and siblings when I was a trainee. I actually found that it was much easier and relatable when I was a trainee because of the title. As soon as I moved into the position as an assistant professor, which, as you alluded to in your question of that prestige, I found that it took much more to introduce myself, especially in new spaces with youth and sibling partners. And so I often reflect on how can I, one, make sure that the research is communicated in a lay language, so plain language. Whenever I introduce myself in a new space, minus all the title and all that, and even in my email signature, is to introduce myself as a researcher and to also identify my positionality where I'm here to learn, I'm here to listen, and I truly want their insights. I think another aspect is that a lot of these partnerships takes time. Both my youth and sibling partnerships, they have been around for over 5 years now. As Amanda already mentioned, took her and I 6 months to come to a place of trust. And that's not to say that it's from my personality or hers or anyone else. It's really around the history of partnerships. Youth and others, even researchers may have had poor experiences in the past or just historically, and that can manifest itself in new relationships. So it takes time.
Wonderful. Pierre, we're going to hold this question until after the next portion because I'm just cognizant of the time. And I'll pass it back to you for the next batch. And I'm going to pin your question so we can get back to it. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Yeah. And Sierra, if you could stick around, one question your way as well, but happy to email it to you after as well. Perfect. All right. So thanks to our previous set of presenters for working into our last slate of the afternoon. And yeah, so first up, we have Maya and her group on the Bridge CPT study. So Maya, happy to hand the podium over to you and have you kick things off.
Awesome. Just making sure you could see the slides okay?
Perfect.
Wonderful. So I also have Aaron and Onelli and Milo joining today. So at some point when they share, we can pin them as well.
All right, welcome.
But just wanted to thank everyone for joining our talk today. We'll actually be building on lots of the things Linda began talking about for the Building Bridges, or our presentation on Building Bridges, reflections from autistic youth, adults, and other team members on our Bridge CPT study related to our co-design process. So in terms of our disclosures, we don't have any relevant financial relationships to disclose. We thank our funders, the Autism Alliance of Canada, as part of my Data to Policy Fellowship, as well as our community partner, Dory Zenner Associates, and SSHRC as part of my CGSD award for funding my work on this project as part of my thesis. So today we'll talk to you a little bit about the Bridge CPT study, followed by talking a bit about our study's co-design process, hearing from all of our team members, and takeaways from our study team. So just before we get started, I think it's great to always meet the team and introduce everybody. We'll all just be sharing really briefly about our positionality and reflections, but the people you won't hear from today that are still integral parts of our team are Michelle, my thesis supervisor, Dr. Michelle Phoenix. We have Ben, Rebecca as well, and you'll be hearing from Onelli, Milo, and Aaron, and I'll call on them shortly. But in terms of me, I'm a speech language pathologist and PhD student in rehabilitation science at McMaster University. And my thesis work really focuses on the Bridge CPT study, which centers co-design and co-creation with autistic youth to improve what communication supports could look like. And I'll turn it over to Aaron for their intro.
Hi, everyone. I'm Erin Decker, and I use the pronouns they, them. I'm an autistic and ADHD adult, PhD student, and a co-creator on this team through our community partner, Dory Zenner and Associates. I joined this research because I'm really passionate about autism self-advocacy, neurodiversity affirming communication, and community-based research. And in my photo here, you can see that I'm enjoying a hobby that brings me joy, which is pottery.
Awesome. Thanks, Erin. And I forgot to mention my hobby was hiking out in Alberta. I don't live there, but it was fun. I'll turn it over to Milo and then Oneli.
Hello, my name is Milo. I am an autistic youth. I joined this team because I wanted to contribute to research that can help autistic youth like myself to be better understood and supported when communicating. In the photo, I am holding one of my art projects, which is one of my hobbies.
Thanks, Milo. And Oneli?
Hi, everyone. My name is Oneli. I'm a second-year undergrad at McMaster and a non-autistic research assistant on this project. I bring living experience growing up with my little sister who is autistic, and that perspective really shapes how I engage with work like this, and I'm so excited to share that with you all today.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
So similarly to what we were hearing earlier, a lot of this research that we're talking about, we want it to be led by autistic people using co-design from the start, rather than researchers driving every aspect of that project, especially non-autistic researchers. One of these mottos that we can use to guide this is the nothing for us or nothing about us without us motto. And there are other guidelines established and published out there for working and engaging with autistic people, such as the Aspire guidelines there. And as well as this, when we're doing this research with autistic folks, our focus is going to be on strengths and acknowledging differences in autistic perspectives within autism in terms of different experiences within autism, but also differences between autistic and non-autistic perspectives. And throughout all of this research, again, we're really focusing on how can this research improve the lives of autistic people today and in the near future. So all of our research focusing on improvement of autistic experience, that co-design, and that strengths-based focus. Next slide. Building on that, autistic-led focus is it being rooted in community-based research, which from an emancipatory autism studies perspective is essential. It builds trust within the research team between autistic and non-autistic research team members, and it benefits everyone involved. The research team members who may not be autistic are learning from our perspectives, and the autistic team members have that experience of engaging in research, shaping that research, and ultimately impacting the autistic community positively. And that involvement within the team, especially as a co-researcher or a co-creator myself, is having a role in the questions that are being asked, the materials that are being created, and the analysis to make sure that when we're interpreting the findings of interviews with autistic folks, that we are interpreting it through the lens of an autistic person that may interpret it differently if they're not autistic. So especially in qualitative research, that perspective of autistic folks on the research team throughout all stages is absolutely essential. So next, I'll pass it off to Milo to talk more about our study.
Thank you, Erin. So today we'll be telling you a bit about our study. It's called Bridge CPT. It is an example of research that is co-designed by autistic people. So to start, before I get into it, I'd like to just mention or talk a bit about our logo and what it means to our team. The acronym Bridge CPT stands for Building Relationships Through Inclusive Co-Design to Guide Effective Communication Partner Training. The concept of a bridge really represents what our study is working towards, as we are trying to bridge the communication gap that often exists between autistic youth and people close to them. We hope that our study will help people close to autistic youth better understand how to support their communication and build bridges for improved understanding. The rainbow in our logo, well, it represents our team being inclusive to all aspects of diversity, is specifically an acknowledgement that several members of our study are part of the 2S LGBTQIA plus community, and we know that many autistic people are part of this community as well. Our research question for this study is, what co-created resources and content should be included in a communication partner training, or CPT, program for autistic youth and people close to them? Our study uses a methodology called qualitative description. Our study uses co-design, specifically equity-based co-creation principles. And our study team includes various people, most of whom are autistic. We also have non-autistic researchers who are allies and clinicians who support autistic people. Our study has 3 parts. The first part is individual interviews, during which we will hear from autistic youth, close communication partners of autistic youth, and speech-language pathologists. The goal of these interviews is to hear about people's experiences with communication. We will use the information we find out from the interviews to pick topics for our focus groups. Everyone will be invited back to join small focus groups where they will work together to co-design the content and resources for a new communication partner training program. And then at the end, we will come back together to share what each small group created in one large group to get feedback. We also plan to evaluate people's experience of our co-design study. In our study, we provide multiple ways to contribute and communicate. Everyone, sorry. So
that's okay. You're doing awesome.
In our study, the potential impact that we hope to have is to be able to create a list of important strategies and considerations for communication with autistic youth that will help us with to make co-designed resources to teach these strategies to close communication partners and anyone else who is able to benefit from it. And we hope to show a successful example of how autism research can be led by autistic people in inclusive and adaptive ways to make sure that everyone's voice can be heard in an equal way. And hopefully that helps us create a society where autistic youth are better understood by the people close to them and those who are trying to communicate with them.
Awesome. Thanks, Mila. I'll turn it over to Anel quickly.
So, briefly walking through how this project actually came together and how co-design was integrated from the very beginning. We first received a grant that allowed us to compensate team members for their time and their expertise, and we partnered with Dory Zenner and Associates, which Erin is a part of, to help inform this process. From there, we recruited a group of autistic youth and adults with a range of ages, gender identities, diagnosis experiences, to really reflect the diversity within the autistic community. We then met regularly as a team and we built the entire study together. So the interview guides, consent materials, focus group questions were created, reviewed, refined with autistic people leading that work throughout. Finally, we carried out the co-design study and completed phase 1 with 40 interviews. I also want to talk a little bit about how co-design worked in practice. So clarity is a huge focus for both our research team and for the people participating. For team members, we're really upfront about roles, time commitments, deadlines, and compensation, so everyone knows exactly what's expected and feels involved comfortably throughout all components of the study in a way that's aligning with their goals as well. For participants, we really focus on accessibility and transparency. So that means things like flexible recruitment, offering multiple ways to communicate, as well as clear information shared ahead of time about what the session will look like and who will be involved. So we really aim to reduce any uncertainty and make collaboration feel truly inclusive.
Continuing on these practices in co-design, another really important element was multiple ways of communicating. We were talking about this in some previous presentations around being able to participate in ways that are meaningful to us, in ways that are accessible to us, in methods that are accessible to us, in whatever form is best, whether it be written, verbal, all those kinds of things, and not being required to do everything at every part. If one part feels uncomfortable to us, we can choose to take a step back and engage more in other different areas. And that can be poster design, interview guides, focus groups, any different part we can engage and pull back in ways that are most comfortable. And the second part is reflecting regularly on our own positionality and power as co-researchers and as autistic members and non-autistic members of the team, where there's regular feedback and that feedback has a chance to be put into practice. So we have ways to anonymously and non-anonymously communicate that with the team and with Maya, our lead on this, to ensure that we feel like throughout the process, we feel safe, we feel heard, and we feel like we're not just putting out input out there to never be impacting the research, that what we say does have a significant impact on the way that the research is run.
Awesome. And I'm mindful that we are at our time. Just big thank you to the rest of our team for presenting. Just shout out to our infographic, and we have closed recruitment, but happy to have people learn more about the study, and just references on the screen and our contact. If you're replaying the video, you can pause it, but I'll quickly be just making sure they all show up on the screen.
Thank you so much, Maya, Milo, Aaron, and Emily. Great talk. And yeah, looking forward to circling back to you all in a moment. All right, next up, so we're just going to hand over the podium to Brianne. So Brianne, feel free to take it away.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Okay, just bear with me as I share my screen here. Is everybody able to see the presentation?
It's still loading. There we go. Yeah, we're
Okay.
seeing your, I guess just if you're just going in presenter mode.
Oh, it's on presenter mode.
We're good now. You're good. You're full screen. Yeah.
I'm full screen now?
You were a moment ago.
There we go. Does that
There we
work?
go. Perfect. You're
Okay, let me
on
just,
point.
there's always panic when I share my screen, and I'm not sure why. Okay. Well, everyone, thanks for having us here today. The title of our talk is Caring for Caregivers, a Partnered Intervention Model. My name is Bree Redquest. I'm a scientific associate at CAMH, and I have been involved in the adaptation and the evaluation of this program. And I'm presenting with my two wonderful colleagues, and I will let them introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lee Steele. I'm a caregiver, a parent of two adult children. My oldest was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder as a toddler, and I've been involved in the Caring for the Caregivers Act intervention for the last 10 years.
And hi, everyone. My name is Jocelyn Tan. I'm a research staff who supports the adaptation and evaluation of ACT.
So let me start with what is ACT. Given that caregivers of children and adults with neurodevelopmental disabilities experience higher rates of depression and anxiety compared to the general population and other disability groups, CC ACT was developed to support the well-being of caregivers using the ACT intervention, ACT being acceptance and commitment training. So ACT is an evidence-based intervention developed in the 1980s. It's based on behavioral and mindfulness practices. And the aim of ACT is to help us live a rich, full, and meaningful life while accepting the pain that life inevitably brings. And this is especially powerful when situations can't be immediately fixed or changed. As caregivers of a loved one with a neurodevelopmental disability, ACT helps us to develop flexibility as we face the challenges of being a caregiver, whether that's a parent or an adult sibling. It helps to know that I'm not alone, that there are difficult thoughts and feelings all along the journey, and recognizing our strengths too. So the evolution of ACT. First, Dr. Kenneth Fung, our mentor, is a psychiatrist at the Toronto Western Hospital in Toronto, and he and his colleagues first started ACT to champion HIV and mental health stigma in minority adults. And then Dr. Fung, who is a parent himself of a child with autism at the time, he's now a young adult, his child, but at that time, he piloted ACT groups for parents of children with ASD. And then in 2014, he trained two parents, I'm one of them, to co-facilitate these workshops with Dr. Fung. And to date, we've trained over 220 clinician and caregiver partners to co-facilitate the workshop together. So what makes ACT unique, and what's with the little symbol of the cup? The visual of this cup represents what it's like for many of us as caregivers. On one hand, it feels like we are so busy pouring from our cup to ensure that our family's needs are being met that it can feel us leaving empty and depleted. And then other times it feels like our cup is right filled to the brim and it just takes one more drop for me to spill over emotionally. So this workshop is an opportunity, the first opportunity that I ever had of all the workshops I had attended, that I could turn the spotlight on my own emotional well-being. And we do this by experiential exercises because we learn in an ACT workshop by participating, not having it being sort of lectured to us in an expert format. We turn the focus on our personal values. Those are our compass that guide our actions. And we learn about acceptance. Probably one of the biggest helpful ideas to me was that there's an opportunity to make room for my painful thoughts and emotions. They're just part of the human experience versus this idea that I just need to try harder and then I'd do better. And we all know that when caregivers are doing better and better support our own well-being, that we are better able to support our loved ones.
So how does this co-partnership model impact participants? So the most important impact of the co-partnership model is that it creates a strong sense of safety, which really makes it easier for participants to be vulnerable. When caregivers serve as co-facilitators, participants are more willing to open up, share honestly, and engage deeply because they see people with lived experience holding space alongside clinicians. The co-partnership model supports this by intentionally combining professional and lived experience, which also helps reduce power imbalances and makes the environment feel more human and accessible. This sense of safety also leads to stronger connections, so participants feel more understood, seen, and supported by both facilitators and peers. And our participants often report feeling more validated because their experience are named and normalized by someone who's been there. And this ultimately helps people feel less alone, knowing their challenges are shared and understood. This slide highlights what participants and clinician facilitators themselves say about the importance of the co-partnered intervention model. So one of the workshop participants shared, I thought it was really helpful to have a parent facilitator. When they share their strategies, it felt even more authentic and manageable for my own life. So this shows that co-facilitation doesn't just feel supportive, but it also makes the content more practical, relatable, and actionable. And from the clinician perspective, co-facilitation is also deeply valued. One clinician says, each facilitator brings a unique set of skills to the workshop. A parent with lived experience brings a level of authenticity and realness to encourage deep and rich participation. Clinicians can draw from their training to support intense and challenging moments. So together, this co-partnership strengthens the safety in the room and creates a safe space where participants feel supported and understood.
Meaningful caregiver partnerships is critical to strengthening mental health interventions. We know that caregiver lived experience plays an essential role in designing, delivering, and adapting programs that create real impact for families. But it's critical that this partnership is authentic, and this requires a commitment to respect, trust, shared decision-making, compensation, communication, support, time, and flexibility. And when these conditions are in place, partnerships become more meaningful and ultimately more impactful for the families they serve. So what have we done? So we've come a long way since 2014, and so far we've delivered ACT to over 500 caregivers. And now we're in this really exciting place where we're adapting ACT to better meet the needs of marginalized populations. So we're adapting ACT for fathers, neurodivergent caregivers, French-speaking caregivers, and Black caregivers. We also heard from caregivers that time is a major barrier. Many simply cannot commit to a 5 or 6 week program. So in response to this, we're currently working to develop a shorter and more flexible ACT model that maintains the core principles while improving accessibility. And importantly, we're actually expanding CC ACT beyond its original focus. We're now delivering ACT to caregivers outside of populations like autism, so delivering ACT to caregivers of children with FASD. And we've even extended ACT beyond caregiving and started running ACT workshops for autistic adults. And a key reason this work has been able to grow and to be sustained is a meaningful involvement of caregivers themselves. Caregivers are not just participants, they're partners in delivery. And right now, our biggest focus is trying to increase access and sustainability. And to do that, we really have to build outside grants. So involving caregivers as co-facilitators builds this capacity and sustainability. Many are familiar with a long wait list of mental health supports. And by training caregivers to co-deliver ACT, we expand the pool of facilitators, increase the number of workshops that can be offered, and ultimately reach more families in more communities and in more places. So this partnered model is really at the heart of everything we do. It's from how ACT was designed and adapted to how it's delivered and evaluated. And there's really no way to capture all of this in just 10 minutes. So this is just a snapshot, but we really want to keep this conversation going. So we want to answer any questions you might have, or maybe we can even chat about how ACT could look like in your community or your organization. So if you'd like to connect with any of us, there's the email on the screen. So please send us an email and we'd really like to chat.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Brianne, Lee, and Jocelyn. Yeah, hoping to get some questions in at the end. So thank you for sticking around. And then so our last presenter for the day is Ishnur. So Ishnur, feel free to share your screen and happy to hear your talk.
Awesome. Thank you, Pierre. Can everyone see my slide?
Oh yeah, perfect.
Yep. Okay. Awesome. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Ishnur, and I'm a PhD student here at the University of Calgary under the supervision of Dr. Sarah McEachern. And I'm really excited today to present on how, in partnership with 38 research partners, we were able to co-design Nova's sleep care. So just for background, our research is rooted in the everyday lives of children with neurodevelopmental disorders, such as autism or intellectual disability. And we know that the majority of these young people engage in behaviors of concern, such as self-injury and aggression. And without timely intervention, these behaviors can significantly impact quality of life metrics for themselves, their caregivers, and families. But at the same time, sleep disturbances or not sleeping well is also very common and is strongly linked with these behaviors, whereby improving sleep, we can improve behavior, but not sleeping well can worsen these behaviors. And the first thing that you do to improve sleep is sleep education. And sleep education has been known to help other pediatric populations by emphasizing the importance of sleep and providing practical strategies. However, there isn't an intervention right now that is specifically tailored to these young people who engage in these behaviors, and it can be integrated within routine pediatric care. And this kind of leads to the question, which is, if we know that sleep is good and we know that it works towards behaviors, why is it so hard to get there? And the reason being is that there are multiple gaps within the field of sleep education. The first important piece to it is that many studies focusing on these interventions often exclude neurodiverse youth and children who are diagnostically diverse across the type of diagnosis, developmental age, and also co-occurring conditions. And this can be very harmful because these sampling restrictions often don't reflect what is seen in clinical practice. And the second gap is that many existing interventions are time intensive and they require caregivers to often commit for multiple weeks at a time. And this can be very frustrating because if the child is not sleeping, the caregivers are also not sleeping as well, and they just don't have the bandwidth to commit. And the other gap to it is that many youth and caregivers are often required to wait long periods of time or put on wait lists to see another healthcare provider or a specialist, when in reality, these young people and caregivers need urgent help and they require help right now. And they require an intervention that's not only tailored to their specific needs, but can be accessible within a familiar clinical setting. And this is where we come in, and in partnership with 38 research partners, so neurodiverse youth, caregivers, and pediatricians, we co-designed Nova Sleep Care, which is an in-clinic physician-delivered sleep education intervention. And our intervention includes a physician reference guide, a youth handout that you can see here on the slide, a caregiver handout, and also a goal-setting component called the Pathway to Better Sleep. And we also have a website that I have a QR code for the end of the presentation. And our intervention works in a way where first at the clinical appointment, the pediatrician would identify a sleep problem that the child is experiencing, and they'll kind of whip out the physician handout to be able to guide an individualized discussion that focuses on why sleep is so important and what we can do about it. And they can also use the caregiver and youth handout to support that discussion with specific context and visuals. And then with the goal setting component or the pathway to better sleep, the youth, caregiver, and doctor work together as a team to identify specific strategies that can improve sleep and are tailored to the needs of the child and laid out in a stepwise manner. So at the end of the clinical appointment, youth and caregivers have a game plan on what they can do to improve sleep. And we also have our website, as I mentioned, and all of our handouts can be accessed through our website, and they're also translated in Spanish and French. And we have an app that is in development that can help support that sleep problem solving at home too. But the purpose of my presentation is to really focus on our co-design journey and how we started and where we're at. So my supervisor, Dr. McEachern, is a developmental pediatrician here at the Children's Hospital in Calgary, and she was already using an initial template that Nova Sleep Care is based on in her own clinical practice. And we knew that in order to operationalize this template or initial draft, we need to make sure that it aligned with end user needs. And the first thing that we did was we conducted these unstructured interviews that explored the facilitators and barriers of in-clinic physician-delivered sleep education. And these findings were able to finalize the physical design and content of our intervention that I kind of alluded to before. And I'll go over our findings very quickly. So we did thematic analysis for these interviews, and our first main finding is that youth and caregivers and pediatricians have really high motivation to target sleep and solve sleep problems. But youth and caregivers conveyed they have limited bandwidth because of challenging experiences in the past with solving sleep, but also highlighting that this can be very overwhelming. And physicians also highlighted that they're also very busy and they would require some sort of streamlined component that can help with their delivery of this intervention. And together, youth, caregivers, and physicians highlighted that they need some sort of goal-setting component, which is where the pathway to better sleep arose. Our research partners also highlighted that our intervention is accessible, not only in terms of the visuals, the format, the content, and reading level, but they also appreciated that we had a diverse range of research partners that were involved with with these interviews in designing this intervention. And then our fourth theme, or key finding, was that our intervention was able to facilitate stepwise sleep problem solving and was capable to do that. And it was really exciting for us as a team near the end of our interviews that youth and caregivers and doctors were already using our intervention without even asking them to. And so it was nice to see how these interviews were able to iteratively refine our intervention to make sure it was usable at the end. But throughout these interviews, there was limited discussion on how we can support the implementation of our intervention in clinical and household settings. And this piece is very critical because, as we know, it takes 17 years for research to make any impact in clinical practice. And we knew that we had to plan for implementation very early on. And so our next phase of our co-design journey was to conduct these consensus-based group discussions with research partners to be able to identify priority areas that can support the implementation of NOAA sleep care in household and clinical settings. And I'll go over our findings very quickly. So we first asked caregivers what could be potential barriers that may hinder the implementation of NOAA sleep care at home. And they conveyed that their schedules are very complex and they're very busy too. And so they said that this could be a potential barrier towards using our intervention at home. We also asked youth and caregivers what are the best ways to be able to learn about NOVA sleep care from the pediatrician. And they suggested even before the clinical appointment, they would want to review our intervention and know what it is and why this intervention specifically and how it can help improve sleep, not only before, but also during the appointment. And then we also asked youth what are best ways that can help them use NOVA sleep care at home. And they suggested an app, which is in development, and also some sort of progress tracker that can help them track their progress in implementing these sleep strategies. And then our kind of fourth kind of goal was to find out ways that we can support pediatricians in training them to use NOVA sleep care and also delivering it. And so they suggested that it would be really helpful for them to do some sort of clinical needs assessment to understand what their own gaps are within sleep, and also having flexible training opportunities to learn more about sleep, through NOVA sleep care and how to use our intervention. They suggested virtual and in-person formats, but also other contexts like presenting NOVA sleep care in a conference, which I'm doing right now. So that's amazing. So this was really helpful in co-designing our intervention and again, planning for implementation very early on alongside research partners. And so our next step in our co-design journey and kind of implementing our intervention is through feasibility testing, which is under the planning phase, but I'll kind of give a little overview of what this will look like. So in partnership, we co-designed this amazing intervention, and now we want to see, is it feasible? And in order to do this is we're going to examine the implementation and impact of our intervention in a Calgary-based pediatric clinic. And we first want to know implementation outcomes. Is our intervention feasible, appropriate, acceptable to youth and caregivers and physicians? And see, if not, how can we iteratively refine this intervention further to make sure that it is? We're also interested in looking at reach and adoption patterns, making sure that we want to know what youth and caregiver dyads are receiving our intervention or any groups that are being excluded, and also looking at adoption patterns, meaning are pediatricians using this intervention and if there are any barriers towards delivering it within a clinical appointment. And we're also interested in evaluating clinical outcomes, meaning does it actually improve sleep and behavior, and see what we can do if not. And so another key piece to this is that it's very iterative, similar to our co-design process. We are going to work in partnership with research partners to make sure that we review the progress, we review the data, and see what we can do to ensure that it is an intervention that can improve sleep and behavior, and again, is accessible. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you everyone for this opportunity. I do want to acknowledge our lab and my amazing supervisor, Dr. McEachern, and our advisory council as well. And as promised, here is our QR code to our website. And we also have a specific social media site for Innova Sleep Care too. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ishnur, for sharing. All right, now for the fun part. Let's open up the space for some Q&A. So happy to invite any audience members to chime in with questions for any of our presenters. And if we still have a few left from the previous cohort, feel free to direct any questions their way as well. So maybe I can get us started. So I guess this one's directed to Maya and the team. So a general question in you all setting up the Bridge CPT work. What did autistic youth identify as the most important element or conditions to feel respected or heard, influential within that partnership?
Yeah, great question. And I'm just to clarify, I think are you talking about like among our team of co-designers versus like the participants in the study?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's hard to pick number one, and I'll let other people join in. And Milo, I see your hands up as well. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to talk. I wasn't sure if Milo was still here. So Milo, you go ahead.
Hi. I would say as an umbrella term for all of the different things now, I am doubting myself because my brain's forgotten your question. I'm sorry.
Sure, I can
Would you
repeat
mind
it. No
repeating?
worries. Sure.
Thank you.
Let me swap my notes real quick. Yeah. So like as an autistic youth,
Yes.
what element or what component did you feel was most important to help you feel respected, heard, or influential within the team?
So I think this is going to be an umbrella term for me and hopefully for some of the other autistic people in our team. But I would say flexibility, having choice and flexibility around how do you want to communicate today at our meeting? Are you going to be speaking verbally? Are you going to be typing in the chat? Do you want your camera on or off? And then assigning roles. What are you able to do between your schedule and your capacity for doing all sorts of different work or tasks, which ones are more exciting for you? That kind of flexibility. Or even if you forget to say something during the meeting, you can always write it down or email it later. That is what I think is the most important thing that our team has done, at least for me. It's made everything a lot more inclusive, and it has made my experience very enjoyable working on this project.
Oh, that's great to hear. Yeah, so that core tenet of being flexible and amenable and kind of just making things work for you it really does build that reciprocal relationship and have you be that fully engaged member of the team. Great to hear. So much of anything else the team wants to add? I see I have a hand from Aaron or Maya.
I was going to go over to Aaron.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, to build on that, one of the things for me is how it's explicitly stated that there is that flexibility and the intentionality, especially that Maya has brought to the team of regularly reminding us that these are different ways that we can engage. We don't have to engage in certain normative ways of working with a team or getting work done, and that reminder is important for me. Another thing as well is when I've asked for example, extra reminders or in emails to highlight the most important things that I need to make sure to respond to. It's really helpful for days that I may have limited capacity to still be able to engage, but in ways that are most accessible to me. So that really clear, intentional speaking of these are ways you can engage, you have choices, and that's a regular reminder, not just once at the beginning, but regularly throughout each time we meet.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you. Great thoughts. Kimberly.
So I just had a question for the Bridge team. Um, so I'm a speech language pathologist myself, and I love the program, and I think it's very needed. I'm just wondering, who would be who do you ultimately see using the program, or like I guess what organizations or what people do you eventually see delivering it or like making it accessible?
Awesome. I can start, and then I don't know if Milo or Aaron, you're welcome to jump in too. But I think from like the clinical side, communication partner training is an established method of intervention with many other areas of SLP, people with traumatic brain injury, people with aphasia, dementia. So there are some guidelines there. But I would say the basic concept of like providing education to people close to someone with a communication difference and putting the onus of responsibility on communication success on them as well can be effective across contexts. So our studies really focused on close communication partners. So people joining as participants in addition to autistic youth and SLPs are parents, siblings, friends, romantic partners. But I definitely think there could be extensions as well to unfamiliar people, like in the healthcare system or in police interactions. This idea of a better communication in a dyadic relationship is, I think, pretty universal.
Yeah, because I would love, I mean, just personally, I would love to, do something like this. I'm in private practice though, so I'm sometimes facing barriers in terms of who's going to pay for it. So, especially with insurance companies, there are some insurance companies like Blue Cross that are really acceptive of like caregiver coaching, but some of them will only pay for the intervention if you are face to face with the quote unquote client. So, or like the person actually receiving treatment or receiving the intervention. So yeah, so I guess like, some of that might be good to consider. Because yeah, I mean, I love the program. I don't know where it would fit into my current structure of how I'm delivering things.
Yeah. And I would just say quickly, kind of something coming up in our team meetings and also with our participant interviews so far is this idea that like communication partner training doesn't necessarily mean like sitting in a room just with a sibling or a parent or a friend and only talking to them about what they need to do. It's like maybe how can we as providers or as anybody better support conversations between autistic youth and people close to them, which could include skills for their communication partner, but also self-advocacy skills and things in the back pocket of the autistic youth too. Maybe I'll turn it to Milo as an autistic youth to speak from their perspective.
So I don't know if this is entirely feasible or not, but I believe that if it was, having these sorts of programs, even just for a day in elementary or high schools, would be incredibly important to have not to have more people, not just those who are close communication partners, but anyone who is going to be in environments and communities with autistic people, which is everyone, having the ability to know these skills and be able to learn about them. I don't know the details of arranging something like that, but I do know that often there are simple one day or presentations or even shorter things that schools are able to arrange. And I think that that would be a wonderful way to get it out to the public and the next generation as they learn to live in this society.
That's an amazing idea. I love it.
Great thoughts all around. Sorry, I realize we are way over time, so appreciate you all sticking it out, and feel free. Hopefully, we'll actually have a few more questions to ask. But yeah, no, it's great to at least have the opportunity. So I'm not seeing any other questions from anyone else or any hands raised. So I just have two more questions. The first is to Brianne, Lee, and Jocelyn. I'm just wondering, in the model that you all were setting up, I'm just wondering what conditions made it possible for caregivers to, I guess, what did they identify as most important in feeling prepared and empowered to take on those co-facilitation roles?
That's a really good question. I'm just going to say, I think that we have really worked on our training model, but Lee is definitely better equipped to answer this, given that she's played a huge role in the training. And she can talk about the different resources and supports that we have set up for caregivers.
That's such a good question. So first of all, in an ACT workshop, before caregivers are trained, every caregiver and every clinician goes through their own experiential ACT workshop. And so they experience ACT for themselves. And then we bring caregivers and clinicians together to be trained. And that's 6 weeks, 2 hours of training, and they're trained together as partners from the beginning. So now they've experienced ACT, they are going on to be a facilitator. They also are coached. So part of the training is being coached by Dr. Fung, but then they are actually coached by caregivers to do the exercises. So they start to build that confidence, both clinicians and caregivers. And after that, we have a community of practice where anybody that's trained can join 5 times a year. We meet, and we also do a newsletter. So there's all these opportunities to share with the other 220 people that have been trained in ACT. So it's well supported all along the juncture. Also for anybody, any caregiver, whether that's a sibling or a parent who takes an ACT workshop, after the workshop ends, they can attend a peer practice group. So it's not just like that workshop and okay, that was kind of interesting, but now how do I learn to continue to practice ACT? And I've been running a peer practice group for 10 years now. And so people can you've taken the workshop and you say, I want to just keep practicing ACT in my own life. I really like this idea of making space for my difficult thoughts and feelings. Wow, I never even thought about that. I just thought I had to try harder. Or what happened to my values? I listened to the disabilities culture's values and what clinicians may have been telling me what to do, but who is the me that I want to be? And so safe spaces to continue to explore that 6 core processes of ACT for anybody that's taken a workshop, and then a lot of support for those who have gone on to want to be trained to be a co-facilitator themselves.
Well, thank you, Lee. All right, promise. Last question from me. And Sierra, thank you for sticking it out. Thanks again for sharing your story and sort of your experience. Your experience. So the broader question your way as well. Like in your opinion, like what do you think? What lessons does your experience offer for creating environments where like we can have that emotional openness and it's valued for everyone?
Oh, that's a good question. I think, like I said, clear expectations, especially for new autistic and ADHD people in workplaces, because there's so much about whether it's creative, corporate, or customer service workplaces. There's so much that's not spelled out, and we need that to be spelled out for us and for us to have room to question those rules given to us. I find regular corporate environments don't give that time or that space. This is something I see on social media a lot about that kind of distance between corporate culture and real life and how the rules that are given to us don't exactly make sense. So that's like a big part of it, and it's kind of like demystifying all these unspoken and unwritten rules. So that is like one big thing. And just having that freedom, that openness, and that kind of um, that permission to question things as they come up in our minds. And also knowing with also knowing like when is the right time to be personal, to be professional. Um, because I think there's like this term called code switching that is a pretty complex thing to get a hold of, but it's something that we can get a grasp of, and it's still good for us to know when to be personal, to be professional, and when to do a mix of both. So I think those are the hardest things for us to grasp if we can't get a clear explanation for it. Um, And so it's starting by breaking down those and making it so there's room to be yourselves, to question things that don't make sense, and to get a good idea of why we want to do the kind of work we want to do. Because I've found this in the past 7 years. I don't want to do work that I'm not passionate about or where I don't see the fruits of my labor, essentially. And it's about seeing the end result of what we do and having that resonate with us. It's like the ADHD thing of like, oh, I need like instant gratification or clear gratification in these cases to help me feel motivated in what I do. So that's like the big top three things for me.
Oh, no, thank you for sharing your reflections. Yes, I think that's a great start anyway for if we can be a bit more cognizant about that. All right, so I am aware of the time. I appreciate you all sticking out to the end. I'm not seeing any other questions. So I guess we can call it there. But just a quick reminder, you're welcome to come back tomorrow and join for our last set of presenters that are organized around child health equity and knowledge mobilization projects. So if that is of interest to you, please feel free to join. If you didn't sign up for it, you can just use the same link that you joined us today. And we look forward to seeing you there. And I look forward to another great session. So have a wonderful day. And we hope to connect with you soon again. Take care. Bye.
Thank you so much.